The passion, chemistry, and intensity of the physical side of a toxic relationship, the physical intimacy, can feel intoxicating. Routinely, I have women tell me that some of the best physical intimacy that they've ever had has been in a toxic relationship. Maybe you've been with other people who were objectively better for you, who treated you better, but the physical intimacy just didn't feel as good. And then it drew you back into those toxic relationships because you missed that experience with them. I completely get this. It was the same for me. When I was in toxic relationships, I felt like the physical intimacy was so good that when I was dating people who were objectively better for me, I wasn't feeling that connection like I had with my exes, and it kept pulling me back into those toxic relationships. The physical connection in those relationships with my exes felt so good that it blinded me to the very clear red flags that were going on. It kept me going back to those exes because the intensity of that connection was so powerful, and I wasn't feeling it with other people who were objectively better for me. So what's up with this? Why does the physical intimacy feel so good in toxic relationships? Why is it so compelling? I'm using the words physical intimacy here so I can keep posting on YouTube. Use your imagination to figure out what I'm talking about. But this is what I'm going to be diving into today. Why it does feel so good, and answering the question that a lot of women ask me, which is, are we just doomed to have bad physical intimacy in healthy relationships? Keep watching for all the answers here. Back when I was going through my own healing journey from toxic relationships, I was actually kind of obsessed with the physical intimacy that I had had in the past. It was making it so much harder for me to get over my exes because it was so good. So at the time I was working with my therapist, I was actually really sad about this. It was bringing up a lot of anxiety because I felt like I'm just never going to have that connection again that I had with my exes. And it was making me second guess the connections that I was experiencing with the people that I was dating. I was really down about it. I was like, I'm never gonna have that physical experience like I had with my exes. I was working with a therapist at the time, and we were talking about this obsession that I have. And she straight up asked me, like, what did you make that connection mean? And I had this massive realization in that moment. Like, I actually gasped. I went, I made it mean that this was real love. I made that physical connection and that chemistry mean that I was in the right relationship, that this was true, real love. And I was actually shocked that deep down, this was what I was believing. I truly believed that if I had the physical connection with someone, then that meant I was in the right relationship, that this was real love. No wonder I was having such a hard time getting over my exes. I had no idea how much weight I was giving that part of the relationship. And I realized, well, no wonder I ended up in toxic relationships. If that was the main thing that I was going by, if I was just going by the physical connection and the physical chemistry, well then yeah, I was definitely going to be drawn into relationships with people who weren't right for me. Because I was choosing people just based on how much passion and chemistry we had together. Not whether we were compatible, not how well they treated me, not how much integrity they had as a person. Nope, just the physical connection. And I'm pretty sure that I'm not alone in this experience. Let me know in the comments if you can relate to doing this in the past. This experience is actually really common, and there's a lot of different dynamics that are going on here when we're talking about the physical intimacy and the physical connection and toxic relationships. So I'm going to now talk about why it is so good, why it does feel so good. The first thing is that compared to the emotions that are going on in a healthy relationship versus a toxic relationship, a healthy relationship in general feels pretty calm. You feel safe, you feel supported. And when it comes to the physical intimacy, if you're used to the intensity of a toxic relationship, the ups and downs, the roller coaster, the intimacy and the emotions in a healthy relationship can kind of feel uninspired. So why is this? when we're in a toxic relationship, when we're with somebody who generally isn't treating us well and isn't good for us, who's hot and cold, who maybe sometimes is abusive to us, we're on edge because we don't know what's going to happen at any moment. And so when we do come together with that physical connection, the emotions associated with it are intense. Also, when our partners are being cold or distant, we feel that longing. We can also feel abandoned. And so when we do come together, it can feel like such a relief. It can feel like, oh my gosh, this is real love. And when we're with someone who is generally cold or distant, when we do get together physically, it can feel like real intimacy. It can feel like the only point of intimacy in that relationship. And usually it is. And so when that's happening, the emotions associated with the physical intimacy that you're having are that much more intense. They're that much more heightened. If you're with someone who is unavailable, for example, that time that you physically connect, that might actually be the only time that you get that intimacy with that person. And so when it happens, there's like this heady mixture of connection, of intimacy, of relief, that it can feel like, whoa, such a rush. This is real love. Versus when you're in a healthy relationship, you already have intimacy. You have a lot of connection outside of that physical realm. And so when you do get together physically, you don't have that intense rush because the intimacy is already there. When you're in a toxic relationship, the emotional intimacy really isn't there. So when you get that physical intimacy, it would be like if you were walking through the desert for days without water and suddenly someone hands you this glass of cold water. You take a sip. It's going to feel like the most amazing glass of water that you've ever had, right? Because you're dying of thirst, because you were so thirsty. That water is going to taste like the best you've ever had because you were so thirsty. Versus, let's say the example here is you're in a healthy relationship and you're taking a hike in the woods. You got your water bottle with you, you've been drinking it the whole time, and you get to the end of the hike and someone hands you that very same glass of water that they handed you in the desert. It's going to taste good, but it's not going to taste as amazingly good as it did when you were coming out of the desert, when you were dying of thirst, when you were desperately thirsty. It is the exact same glass of water, but because on that hike, the healthy relationship, you were drinking water the whole time, you were staying hydrated, you don't have that same intense experiences. You don't have that same intense experience as if you were in the desert, not having anything to drink. So in the healthy relationship example, you've been hiking, drinking water the whole time. You take that glass of water that someone offers you and it's like, no big deal. I mean, it tastes good. It's water. It's a very different perceptual experience that you're having when you're walking through the desert for 3 days and not having anything to drink. That is quite literally the difference of how it feels for physical intimacy in a healthy versus a toxic relationship. When you are starving of intimacy, of emotional connection, when you are in that place of physical intimacy in a toxic relationship, it feels amazing because usually, again, it's the only point that you're having physical intimacy, that you're having intimacy with this person. So I'm still talking about this water example here because it's such a great example to talk about the dynamics of physical intimacy in a healthy relationship versus a toxic relationship. So again, if you are taking a hike and you've been drinking water the whole time, someone hands you that glass of water at the end of the hike, it's not a very memorable or intense experience because you've been drinking the whole time, because you've been staying hydrated. But back to the toxic relationship example of walking through the desert, when you take that glass of water, it's such an intense and such a memorable experience that it seals in your mind as like, oh my God, this was the most amazing water I've ever had. When in reality, it's the same damn water that you were drinking on the hike. It's just perceptually so different. All right, enough about the water. But my point here is that when you're in a toxic relationship and the emotional intimacy is missing from the relationship, When you have that physical connection, that intimacy, it feels that much more amazing and that much more memorable. So when we're in a toxic relationship, the mixture of all of these emotions, the longing for someone who isn't available, the uncertainty of what's going to happen, the relief when they finally come around and give you attention, combined with the mixture of all the feel-good chemicals and emotions that come with physical intimacy, well, it's no wonder that we come away feeling like these experiences were some of the best that we've ever had. And if you have similar subconscious stories about physical intimacy like I did, then it can keep you in these toxic relationship dynamics because we make it mean so much. If it means to you, like it did to me, that this is true love, that this is real love, well then yeah, we're going to think that this is the person we're supposed to be with because the connection is so intense. And this is actually reinforced by a lot of what's around us. This is reinforced by society and the media. This is the type of love that we see in the movies, that we see on TV. It's intense, it's passionate, and in the movies, these people are who we're meant to be with. So the second dynamic that I see in relationships like this, that is also very common, is when we feel like we have to work really hard for love, when we have that subconscious belief that we have to earn love. When we finally get it, like when we get this person's attention, it can be such a hit for the ego. And by hit, I mean a good feeling. Like when someone is unavailable or distant, and all of a sudden they finally come around and pay attention to us, it feels like such a rush. It can almost be like a mental type of orgasm of like, finally I'm good enough. Finally I've got them. This is a common dynamic, especially if you had parents or caregivers who were narcissistic, who quite literally made you feel like you had to earn their love. You get caught in this dynamic and it carries into your adult relationships, and you keep feeling like you have to earn someone's attention, someone's affection. And this creates a really intense emotional experience, especially when you connect physically, versus someone who already loves you, who you don't need to earn that love, who already cares for you, where all you have to do is let yourself be loved. The ego codes that as boring, not interesting, and you tend to get drawn into those toxic dynamics. And the ego will actually also code that as not love, not real love, if what love was to you was earning it. So, does this mean that we are forever doomed to have bad physical intimacy in healthy relationships? No, not at all. So what helped me to break out of these dynamics was to first and foremost understand that intense physical attraction, that intense chemistry that I was feeling, that didn't necessarily mean that I was in the right relationship. Was it fun to have that physical experience? Yeah, for sure, it was fun at times. But was it worth all the pain and anxiety that I also experienced in those relationships? No, it really wasn't. The intensity of those physical connections that I had was like being on a roller coaster. And I actually hate roller coasters. I don't like them, but I'm going to go with this example here. It was like being on a roller coaster where sure, it's fun and scary for like the first couple times, but you can't ride that roller coaster forever. Like you can't take a nap on a roller coaster. Eventually, it's going to become really stressful and really tiring because like when you're on a roller coaster, you're kind of in fight or flight. Like you are scared and you can't keep that up long term. That type of relationship, the roller coaster relationship, is not sustainable in the long term. That person who gives you those intense highs and lows, that's not the person that's going to be there for you when times get hard, when you need a true partner, when you actually need support. That's not the kind of person who's going to be there for you in good times and bad, who you can actually build a life with. I also worked really hard to heal those parts of myself that were drawn towards toxic relationships. When I say heal, I just want to clarify. It doesn't mean I tried to get rid of those parts of myself or suppress those parts of myself. Healing means integrating. It means taking a look at those parts, hearing what they had to say, feeling the emotions associated with them, and bringing them into myself so that I would become more whole and more healed. That's what healing really means. Doesn't mean pushing that stuff away. When we're talking about integrating, it means there's a part that's wounded. There's a part that has been pushed away from our consciousness, and we need to bring our attention to it and help it to heal, help it to feel like we care about it and we love it. So I worked really hard on that. I released the emotional baggage from my past, like a lot of abandonment trauma that I had, that was making me feel like those attractions were true love. And I also rewired a lot of the subconscious beliefs that I was carrying around, like that I'm not good enough or that everyone's always going to leave me, so that I was actually not even that attracted to those types of people anymore. If you want to do this work yourself, this is now what I help women do in my 12-week Living Free Finding Love program. So I'll leave the link here in the description. You can check out all the details. I'd love to work with you. It's a program I created for women just like you, who may be watching this and wondering, can I ever feel as good as I did with my ex? The answer is yes. So these days, I actually wouldn't say anymore that the best physical intimacy I've had was in toxic relationships. There's something uniquely beautiful about the physical intimacy you can have with someone who you know truly loves you, who accepts you, who you feel safe with. Knowing that the person that I'm with truly loves me makes that physical intimacy a wonderful part of an already amazing relationship. Not the other way around, where the physical intimacy was the only good part of a toxic relationship that I was in. I also matured a lot, and what I was looking for in a relationship changed very much from when I was first dating, like in my teens and 20s. Back then, yeah, I was all about the passion and excitement and the chemistry, but through all the bad experiences that I had, my priorities shifted, and I didn't care about that part of the relationship so much. Not that I don't care about it at all, like it's still important to me, but it's not the main focus. I actually care a lot more about how this other person is showing up in other ways. What I've noticed happening for me is now, because the other parts of my relationship are so much better, that's a big reason why I don't put so much importance on the physical intimacy anymore. Again, it's still good, I still like it, but it doesn't hold as much weight for me as it used to. Because like I said, the other parts of the relationship are so awesome that it just like all of it is good, not just this one part. And also because I don't make it mean that this is the right relationship for me anymore. I'm looking for so much more than that. Now, I would be remiss to leave out the reality that sometimes can be the case where, yeah, our exes were just really good in that area. Maybe they're really skilled. Maybe they just were talented in that area and they really knew what they were doing. That does happen. So it can help to remember that physical intimacy is actually a skill that we can learn. Yeah, some people are naturally good at it. Some people are naturally gifted. But even so, just like anything else, even if you're naturally talented in that area, you still gotta learn. You still have things that you have to perfect and practice to get good at it. So if we can dial back those black and white thoughts, like they're either good or bad at physical intimacy, the people that we're with, and understand that it's a skill, it's a continuum here, that somebody can learn to please you, to pleasure you, then it can feel so much easier to move on from an ex. So if we're meeting someone and the physical intimacy isn't 100% on point immediately, doesn't mean that this is not the right person for you. Doesn't mean that your ex was the best and you have to give up hope. It just means that this is something that you guys can work on together. You can teach your partner how to give you pleasure, what you like, and if they're a great partner, they'll usually be more than willing to do that for you. If you have a partner who is open to learning what you like and wants to please you, that is way more valuable than being with someone who's naturally gifted in that area, but who doesn't care about your feelings. Physical intimacy can get better as a couple. As you guys learn how each other's bodies work, it's not something you have to give up on right away. If your partner is good to you and willing to learn what you like, you're in the right place. If you want to learn about another common dynamic that keeps us in toxic relationships, click here to learn what happens when your attachment system gets activated. And click here to subscribe. I come out with new videos every week on how to break the cycle of toxic relationships, heal, love yourself, and find real love.